Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm going to go ahead and try to keep this video short and concise because there's only a few things I want to address in this video specifically. And this is to be focusing on how to memorize Arabic vocabulary fast and not forget it. SubhanAllah, and I'm going to take you through just how I experienced things in my journey and how I saw personally the methods that I used that have allowed me to memorize vocabulary easier and better in a more efficient way than the ways I've done before. So in the beginning, and this is something a lot of people tend to stick to, is repetition, right? Especially repetition for long periods, like repeating a word 100 times or 500 times or more than that, just to solidify it in your brain. I don't think this is a bad idea, especially in the beginning, at least. When your tongue is not used to the Arabic language, your ears are not used to the Arabic language, and it almost feels like you're just struggling to say a specific word, and it's more painful to memorize individual words at the beginning, right? But as you gain more knowledge, as you memorize more vocabulary, as you improve your grammar over time slowly, and you start to see the patterns in the Arabic language, you start to see how the Arabic language works as a whole slowly over time. These things, they just click. They start to slowly click in your head, and then memorizing becomes easier and easier and easier. And then at that point, repetition, it doesn't really have, a great role in memorizing, though it's still important to a degree. So basically, like at the beginning of my journey, right, I was memorizing by focusing on repeating the word a lot, like 100 times, maybe about 100 times. And then there's this other method that I would use. It's very, very important. It's called active recall, which is where active recall is also known as spaced repetition as well, where basically what you do is you review, you do the initial memorization, you do the initial period where you go over the stuff, you go over the new vocab, and then after a little while, it's going to be 5 minutes, it's going to be 10 minutes, it's going to be 30 minutes, it's going to be an hour, it can be a few hours, you try to use your brain and try to think, and see how much you remembered. Just do this in your head. Try to remember how much vocabulary you memorized from the initial memorization period, time frame. And when you're able, even though it's painful, especially at the beginning, even though it's painful, if you manage to get it correct, like you come up with the word, then you check yourself. You got it correct. Your brain solidifies it at that point. Like it's way more likely to keep it locked in at that point. It's like almost like it's locked in compared to if you just reviewed it again without trying to use your brain to think and memorize it that way. Because when you use your brain to think and you try to remember with your brain, once you remember, you're not going to forget it, or at least it's going to be a lot easier to not forget it. Especially when you don't have to do as much Muraaja'a and whatnot. So active recall, big important thing to do. Active recall has been a game changer in the way I've memorized vocabulary. I still use it. It's very, very important in my opinion. So at the beginning, I was using a lot of repetition, and then I would try to use active recall. It was definitely harder at the beginning because it felt way more painful to memorize the vocabulary at the beginning. But as my Arabic continued to improve over time, as I started to learn the verb conjugations, the tasrif, and understood how this stuff works, I started to understand the patterns, learning the forms and whatnot. There's a pattern. You're able to, when you basically, like at the beginning when you're memorizing Arabic verbs, right, you have to memorize the madi, the mudari', the amr, and the masdar. As my lesson started getting a little bit more sense, I had to memorize the ism al-fa'il and the ism al-maf'ul. So this is like 6 different things you have to memorize on one verb, right? How the pattern changes through the verb, memorizing each, and then remembering to use each and whatnot. But you start to pick up the pattern where you just know what the present tense is, you know what the amr is, you know what the mudari is, you know what the amr is, the imperative, you know what the masdar is, then the noun version of the verb, the ism al-fa'il, the thing that does the verb, and then the maf'ul, the thing that the verb falls upon. You start to know this by just memorizing the forms, knowing the forms, and solidifying those patterns in your head. And then you just have to memorize the initial verb, the past tense verb, and then at that point, it's a lot easier. But that's where I'm saying, like at this level, repetition, you don't need repetition as much. You only need to like repeat it maybe a few times. Typically now I repeat it in between like 10 and 25 times, usually no more than 30, like between 10 and 30 times. I stop there, and then the next most important thing that I do this is something you should stick with even at the beginning, in my opinion, is to put the Arabic verb and the Arabic word, whatever vocab you learned, put it in sentences, put it in jumlat. Because when you put it in sentences, that solidifies your, not only does it make it easier to memorize that word, but it solidifies your understanding of that word by using real examples of applying that word correctly in sentences. And that changes everything. When you do this specifically, emphasize this more. Even at the beginning when you're repeating, put it in sentences. Even though, at the beginning you don't have a lot of vocab and you're gonna have to rely on your mother tongue, typically English, you're gonna have to rely upon your mother tongue to put put it in sentences. Just put the Arabic verb in sentences, have the translated version in English, right? Use the English version of that Arabic word in sentences so that you can solidify the understanding of it. And over time, when you start picking up more vocabulary, even when you have a little bit of vocabulary, try your absolute best to use the vocabulary you know and that you've learned to put that new word in sentences. Like obviously for like me, when you get to a higher level where you memorize more verbs and more vocab, you have more lexical items in your brain, it's a lot easier to come up with sentences, right? Like for me, it's just like I can easily just instantly come up with a sentence now, almost. But that may be a lot harder for you using the vocab you have already. So try your best to do that. If you can't, use English sentences, but try your absolute best, especially as your vocab increases. You want to rely more and more upon Arabic rather than English as your vocabulary increases. And I found that just doing this, focusing on this, just repeating it a little bit, literally takes me a few seconds to just repeat it until I know the pattern, and the pattern comes quickly. Then I just start using it in sentences. I just focus on putting the Arabic verb, the Arabic mufrad, the mufrad or the fi'l or whatever vocab word that I let, to help solidify my understanding of that specific word. And when I do that, it makes, along with active recall, focusing on active recall, trying to, after I did my memorization session later on, even if it's shortly or a little later, focus on trying to see how much I can remember. I do the same thing when I'm memorizing Quran as well. When I repeat the ayahs a few times and I try to, after that I use active recall and I try to see how much I can remember. It's very painful, for me, even though, alhamdulillah, I can understand about 70% of the Quran now. When I read it, it's still pretty painful for me to be able to try to remember those ayat. And that's what helps me solidify them in my brain faster. Just to summarize, use active recall, put the vocab in sentences as much as possible. Yes, use repetition, but rely on repetition typically towards the beginning, not so much later on in your journey. As you continue to progress, rely less and less on repetition. That's what I did. Like at the beginning, I was doing 100 plus, then I started doing 75, then I started to 50, and then I started going 25 or less. Like repetition's almost not necessary. I could just like maybe pick up something quickly, instantly, just by putting in sentences, and then trying to do active recall, and then boom, I'm good. And then I just do Muraaja'a. This is also important. Extra tip here: you want to make sure that you review the vocab, and when you review the vocab specifically, just put in more sentences. That's literally all you have to do. Just put in more sentences. And as you're speaking as well, when you practice speaking more, this is very, very important to practice speaking, because speaking is literally one of the best ways to become fluent in speaking, because you have to practice speaking. Then these words will start to come to your head when you need to think of them at the right time, and at that point you'll be able to solidify it. That's active recall right there, right? When you're actively in a speaking session, you're like, oh, what was that word I learned? Nasitu. What was that word? Oh, it was mutazawij. Yeah, and then you boom, you'll memorize it, right? It'll be a lot easier to solidify that in your brain. There's just words that come to me like instantly. Like I don't even have to think when I say them. But then there's words that take a little bit of time to think. There's some that take a little bit more time to think, and then some, you might end up forgetting. So when you do Muraaja'a, just put it in more sentences. And you don't even have to repeat that much. You can just look at it, put it in more sentences, and that's usually enough. Like when I review my vocab, I literally just go through it like once, and then after that, try to put it in sentences if I can. But I think these are the best ways that you can take to focus on memorizing vocabulary as fast as possible and not forget it. Active recall, putting the vocab into sentences and repetition, but less repetition, more trying to focus on active recall and just putting the vocab in sentences. I think really these two are the biggest things, is active recall and putting the vocab into sentences. And you know, when you do speaking practice, you're literally doing active recall, spaced repetition. So by far the best way, and this is what's gotten me to memorize vocab a lot faster and do more in less time, alhamdulillah, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That basically sums up everything. I have a school community. If you want to go ahead and join it, in the school community, I help Muslim brothers and sisters with improving their Arabic, but it's also a general community where we can all basically focus on improving ourselves and becoming better Muslims for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in there you'll have closer access to me, and I'll be able to assist you more in your personal journey. And so I highly recommend you go join the school community. It's free. It's completely free to join. I also put a link to Andalus Institute, the program that I am studying in right now, in the description as well, if you want to go ahead and check it out and see if it's something you're interested in pursuing. It's a great institute. I do highly recommend it. I mean, I've stayed in it until this time, and I've been able to make so much progress by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alhamdulillah. Like I've mentioned in previous videos, it's given me that structure I need. And you can go ahead and check out this video here, where I explain the importance of learning the Arabic language and why Muslims need to learn Arabic. So then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.